Hi guys, so this is a quick tutorial on how to do smear frames. Throughout our short film, there's going to be two different types of smear frames that we use. There's duplicate smears and then there's stretch smears. The duplicate smears we're only going to be using in a select few shots, just because it can look weird a little easier. So we're going to be a lot more sparing with that. So for the most part, we're going to be using stretch smears. That's what this video is for. It's to show you guys how to do stretch smears when you need them. And I'm just going to be going over those right now. So basically how we're going to do stretch smears is we're going to be using lattice deformers. And I'll show you, I've got this little animation here, right, where he swings his arm up and then he swings his arm down, right? So if we play it back, that's what it looks like. Now the arm motion can be a little hard to follow sometimes because there's only one frame where it's in between the top and the bottom, right? And so because of that, I'm going to say let's use a smear frame here, right? Because that'll make it a little easier to follow the motion, and it's just going to kind of feel a little better. So how we're going to do that is over here you have these layers that are part of the rig, right? These layers contain different things. So this one is for the geometry, this one is for the controls. You've got joints, and this is locators. You don't want to worry about these most of the time. Although if you do want to turn off the visibility of your controls, you can just do that through this, right? This little letter on the side, this little box on the side, most of them have an R. That's because they're in reference mode. What reference mode means is that you can see it, but you can't touch it, right? That's why when you're working with the rig, you can select the controls, but you can't select the geometry. So in this case, we're actually going to turn that off of reference mode, and now you can select the geometry, right? So make sure that when you're doing these stretch smears, that is the only time that you have the geometry layer in reference mode. Before you're doing the stretch smears, it should never be out of reference mode, and after you're done doing this, the smear frames, it should also just go straight back to being in reference mode, just because it's really easy to break your rig when you are able to select the geometry, and also it can be really annoying to animate on things if you're accidentally selecting the geometry all the time, right? So just make sure that you always have that on reference whenever you don't really need it to be off of it, right? So anyways, we're going to set it off of reference so that we can select the geometry, and then you're going to select this arm because this is the one that we're doing the stretch smear on. And we're going to go to deform, and let's say lattice. Oh, oops, hold on. Deform, lattice. Okay, so this is what a lattice deform looks like. It's basically a box that has different dimensions, subdivisions and different dimensions. And you can move the vertices of those subdivisions, and it'll move whatever is being affected by it on the inside based off of, you know, where it is in relation to those pieces of the box, right? So right now let's put it this way, and it always goes very tightly to the geometry. It goes to like the very highest and lowest, and in like forward and back and left and right points of the whole thing. But I think it'd be more convenient to have it kind of oriented in a diagonal position like this, right? So I take this and I start rotating it, and uh-oh, that's not working because the arm is going with it, right? So when you create a lattice, you have this lattice, and then you have the base, right? And let's hide this lattice for a second. There's nothing else there, right? The base is basically an invisible box that represents a point of reference for the lattice so that the lattice knows where it is and its scale and its rotation in relation to the base. So if we move the base, then you can see everything moving in the opposite direction, right? Or if we scale it up, everything starts shrinking. If we scale it down, everything starts growing, right? And that's because the lattice is seeing its frame of reference move one way, which means in relation to its frame of reference, it's moving the other way, right? So if you want to reposition things, you basically select the lattice and the base together, and then you move those things so that they're moving with each other as things change. All right, so we're going to reposition that. Let's kind of scale it up a little here, bring it out just so we have a little more wiggle room, and we're going to bring it out as well. All right, so now I can take these lattice points and I can start moving around, right, and it'll affect the geometry. Now this isn't super helpful for me right now because it gives me very limited options on how I'm able to deform it. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the lattice and go to the attribute editor, and you're going to look at the lattice shape, right? And then it's got the S, T, and U divisions. That's basically the X, Y, and Z divisions of the lattice, right? So we can say, hey, I actually just want 2 in that direction, and I'm going to want 5 in this direction, right? And that's going to work for what we want right now. So now we've got it in these divisions that we want. We can take these lattice points, we can like stretch them, we can move them around, and we can do what we want with them, right? The issue is that you'll notice when I select these lattice points, they don't have their own transform that you can reset to a certain position, right? So if I place all of these things and then later I say, oh, I actually want that to go back to where it was, I don't have any way of doing that, right? So a good way to get around this is you select a set of lattice points that you know you're going to have moving as one, right? And you go deform cluster, right? And basically what a cluster is it says, okay, whatever was selected when the cluster was created, this cluster now has control over those bits. So as this cluster moves, so do those lattice points, right? So I'm going to go lattice points like these, and I'm going to press G. If you don't know what G does, it repeats the last action that you did. So in this case, it's create a cluster, right? And I'm going to do that for this set as well. Press G. So now I have these 3 cluster handles that affect this bit and this bit and this bit, right? And not only that, but I can move this one, and then I can move this one, and then I can move this one and scale it, and then I say, oh, you know what, I don't want that last one to be there, I want it to go back to where it was. Now I can just go here and I can say 0, and I don't have to undo my work by doing Control-C for everything else, right? So that's why the cluster handles are super nice to have. Anyways, so let's say we're going to pose these and how we want them. So let's kind of stretch them out a little, and let's do this even more, and then we're going to take all these, kind of move them down. Let's move that even further. Now it's going to go real far. Right. So now we've got this smear frame where it's all stretched out in kind of weird ways. And as you can see, right, it's whipping up. It might read a little better, that motion, right, because it kind of traces out where the arm is going. And in fact, let's actually go back to this frame and move it this way a little bit. Yeah. Anyways, so we've got that smear frame. The issue is now all the way back down, it's deforming really weird as it passes through this lattice deformer, right? Because this thing is still affecting it, and that's really inconvenient, right? So let's go back to here, and what we can do is we can say, okay, first off, all these clusters, I'm going to key them right here, right? And second off, in the frame before, I'm going to reset all their values back to their default, and I'm going to key those there. And I'm going to copy that. I'm going to do that on the frame as well, the frame after as well, right? So that solves our issue. On top of this, something good to do is this lattice deformer. If you click on the lattice and go to outputs, you'll see this FFD1, right? What this basically is this is the node that is been applied to our geometry with the information of the lattice deformer. Right, so we can access it by clicking on the lattice and going down here, or we can click on the geometry, and under the inputs, the geometry should have that same thing as well, right, that FFD1. This first attribute is envelope. An envelope for deformers and constraints and stuff is basically saying this is the degree to which my deformer is going to be affecting it, right? So right now it's set to 1, and it affects it just normally, right? If we set that to 0, then even though the deformer is still deformed like this, right, it's still all stretched out, it's no longer affecting our geometry, right? And that's something that can be keyed. So we're going to select this, and we're going to say, let's key that, and let's key it. Set it to 0 in the frame before, just to make sure that we're not affecting what we don't want to be. And we're going to set this to 0 in the frame after, right click, key selected again, right? So now we've just got it affecting in that one frame, right? And then we could say, okay, well now on the frame down, we also want it to be affecting it. Okay, this is part 2 to the stretch smear tutorial. My video got cut off, so I gotta record it in 2 parts. Anyways, this is the second part to it, and as I was saying, we want to also add a smear frame to this part here, right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, in this bit here, we have all this stuff keyed, right? Those clusters and the lattice envelope and everything are keyed. We are also going to actually take these two, we're going to key those here as well, right? And then when we get down to this frame here, now we can reposition it where we want it. And we can, let's kind of put it there, we can key it again. Right, so now on this frame, it's in a different spot. Okay, so now that we've got it where we want it, we can select the geometry and go to FFD1, right? In the envelope, we're gonna set it to 1. And we're going to key that again. Alright, so now it's affecting it, as you can see. Okay. And now the envelope, we're also going to say, okay, don't affect it on the frame after. So we'll key that once again. Alright, so now on this one, we can take our cluster handles, kind of do with them what we will. Let's key that. Okay. Alright, so now we've got all those where we want them. We're just going to set a key on those. We'll set them again, just to be safe, we'll set them back to their regular values on the frame after. Alright, so now we've got this stretching in that bit, and we've got it stretching in this bit. And now when let's hide all these. When we play it back, now we've got it doing a little smear frame. You know what? So the reason I didn't keep it hidden is because this visibility is, by default when you key by pressing S, it will actually key the visibility as well. So if we want to, we can just delete that because we don't need to key on that attribute. And we can hide them now, and they won't show back up. So that's what our animation looks like now, right? It's a little easier to read the motion that's going on, right? And I would, if this is for an actual animation, I'd probably tweak it further from, you know, what I needed and stuff. But yeah, so it's affecting it only on the frames that we want it. It's helping our animation be a little easier to read, and it's just kind of generally adding a little more stylization. Now that I'm done with that, remember, put this back to reference mode. You don't want to be selecting these things again, right? And yeah, so it should all be working just fine. Several people are probably going to run into issues with when they're doing this, right? Some rigs are probably going to break, but you know, we'll kind of just figure it out in those cases. This method, if you work through all the steps the right way, it shouldn't break the rig, but it's pretty easy to mess up little things. So, you know, we'll kind of figure those parts out as we get there. Anyways, yeah.